Today, we have to be on the watch because we have to watch out for Egyptian horses, all right? We got to watch out for Egyptian horses. And these Egyptian horses are pretty sweet. I mean, look at this awesome horse here, right? That's something worth chasing after, isn't it? Is this not funny? All right. I look at that guy. I grew up with horses, and I would see a horse act like this sometimes, but that's usually when it had like a snake that it saw underneath its hooves. But that's impressive. That's an Egyptian horse worth chasing after, right? Like it's impressive. It's impressive here. Actually, before we get there, we'll let you watch this a little bit more here. But we need to remember to watch out for the Egyptian horses. So why am I saying that? Why am I saying that? It's because we're going to get into Deuteronomy and 1 Kings. So if you have your Bibles, this is going to be a pretty Bible-heavy sermon. If you have your Bibles, I invite you to turn to Deuteronomy chapter 17, but also 1 Kings chapter 10. You don't have to, but it's just, I'm going to kind of be rapid firing through there, so you can look it up if you want to. Look it up later. Really, the first part of 1 Kings 1 through 11, is kind of where we're going to be today, because it's kind of talking about all this stuff. And here's what I love about this, is that the author of 1 Kings is being cheeky, all right? I know many of you probably have never heard the Bible, except for me probably, as the Bible authors being cheeky, all right? But it's true. It's true, and I'll show you, and it's fascinating, and there's a good lesson for it. So let's just see where the room is real quick. When you think of King Solomon, is he a goodie or a baddie? But he also was like wise too, right? Like it's complicated. It's a complicated relationship. It's like that one boyfriend or girlfriend you had in college, right? Like that. It's like how are you guys doing? It's complicated, right? Like it's over there. How's your uncle doing? It's complicated, right? Like he's fine, but right? Anyway, so let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 17, beginning with 14. And this section too, it's bigger than what I'm actually going to read, but we'll pick it up. This first one is kind of all set up, this first slide. So when you come to the land, all right, well, hold on. Let's set this up. Where were they when Deuteronomy was written? Someone tell me. They're in the wilderness, right? They're in the wilderness wandering around. Moses is leading them, all of that. So we haven't had kings yet. We haven't had any of that stuff yet, right? Okay, so here's what they say. When you go to the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you possess it and dwell in it, and then say, I will set a king over me, like all the nations that are around me. So they want a king, right? He goes, when you want a king, you may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set as a king over you. So Saul, King David, these are kings that God ordained, that he chose, right? So you may not put a foreigner over you who is not your brother. All right, that makes sense. Going to the 16, this is where the interesting verses are. Only he must not acquire many horses for himself. See this? Will acquire many horses for himself, or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. You got to watch out for those Egyptian horses, right? Since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return to that way again. So don't go back to Egypt. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive gold or silver. All right, you guys all got what's going on there? So we have 4 simple rules. Really, there's 5. But it says no foreigner king. All right, check, all right? No pining after Egypt. That's Chris's translation. No pining after Egypt, especially no Egyptian horses, right? It says that especially there. No many wives, and no excessive gold or silver. It actually says, if you keep on reading Deuteronomy after that, it says that the king must basically be a scholar of the Bible. He's supposed to be like a priest that's kind of always studying. But we didn't have room for all that. Like that. So no foreign king, no pining after Egypt. Now, why are they not supposed to pine after Egypt? Why are they not supposed to be about Egypt? It's because God rescued them from Egypt. Don't go back. Don't go back. Don't go back. Don't have anything to do with them. God has rescued you from all of that. So anything that's regarded as Egyptian, don't do it. And so we talked about this last week. But one of the things he says in Deuteronomy is that don't have slaves, because the Lord your God took you out of slavery. God's people will not have slaves. All right? So you remember all this, right? Like the things that we had talked about before. So we have all. So long story short, don't chase after Egyptian horses. So we have, long story short, we have King David, and King David does a pretty good job, right? Kind of a man after God's own heart. He does some batty things, but we all kind of do that, and we all love King David. And his son is Solomon. Do you know who Solomon's mother was? It was Bathsheba, which is fascinating. So he's not the child from that affair. That child died, but it is Bathsheba's. It is Bathsheba's child. Fascinating. So Solomon comes up, and God ordains him to be king and makes him king over all Israel. And God looks at him. We know this story pretty well because it's famous Solomon stories. God says to Solomon, I will give you anything. Anything. You could have wealth, power, whatever you want. I will give you anything, right? And what does Solomon choose? Wisdom, right? Here it is from 1 Kings chapter 3. He says, you just answered it with wisdom. All these words I'm about to read is wisdom, all right? So give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this, your great people? In other words, wisdom. Right? So he gives him wisdom, and because he asks for wisdom, God also gives him power and incredible wealth. Right? So Solomon is this, and everything's chugging along, everything's going great, things are wonderful. Like he's making Israel into this super strong national power in there. He's going to rebuild the temple with cedars. Have you ever thought about that? It was weird. They rebuilt, Solomon's temple was made out of cedars. Did you know that? Why is that important? Have you ever seen Israel before? Is it a place that you would call tree heavy? No. Right? Why is gold valuable? There's not much of it. So trees are like the luxury thing. So they make it out of trees. We think about that and we're like, well, I once had a house built out of sticks. I get scared every time a hurricane comes by, right? Like we think differently about this. But so that's a luxury good that he's building it out of cedars. It's a luxury good. But the big idea here is that Solomon is blessed. He's blessed. He's blessed more than pretty much anybody else. He is blessed. He's got it going great. So things are all good, right? Yeah. Not so much. Because it appears like Solomon is chasing after these Egyptian horses. And those Egyptian horses are pretty sweet. You got to watch out for those Egyptian horses in your life. But he's chasing after them. So when we turn to 1 Kings chapter 10, right? I'm going to read, I only put verse 28 and 29 on here, but I'm going to read from verse 26 of chapter 10, okay? And Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen. So just a few, just a couple. Whom he stationed in the chariot cities with the king in Jerusalem. And the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone. What did it say about that in Deuteronomy? Don't have much gold, silver? Okay, all right. So never mind. You didn't see that. So he made silver as common in Jerusalem as stone. What's the author of Kings doing there? He's being cheeky is what he's doing. You see what he's doing there? He's making it as common as stone, and he made cedar as plentiful as the sycamore of the Cephalia. I don't know. All right, then verse 28. And Solomon's import of horses was from Egypt and Cu. You see that? And the king's traders received them from Cu at a price. A chariot could be imported from Egypt for 600 shekels. Do you see what's going on here? Kings, the author of Kings is wanting us to see what's actually happening. It's wanting us to remember Deuteronomy. It's wanting us to remember God's commands. And he's almost speaking positively of Solomon, but he's saying, hey, look over here. It's a little dubious and fishy. Like it's a little fishy. I don't know if you guys really understand what's going on. And then we read 1 Kings 11 a little bit ago, which Kevin, I'm really glad I gave that to you because you got to read all the names. Like that was great. So he was 1 Kings 11 is about all these wives which he's not supposed to have. It's obvious that he's chasing after those Egyptian horses, right? Let's look even further. 1 Kings chapter 9, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because there's a lot of like middle words here, but you can look at it and make sure I didn't cut anything out that I shouldn't have. But it says, on the account of the forced labor that King Solomon drafted to build the house of the Lord. Let's talk about this for a second. What's forced labor? Bingo. What is he having the forced labor doing? He's building the temple with forced labor. He's building the temple with slavery. And if you don't get the hint of where the author of Kings is trying to tell you here, the very next verse says, hey, remember the Pharaoh of Egypt? He captured Gezer and he gave it as a dowry to his daughter, Solomon's wife. In case you forgot about this whole Egypt thing and how you're not supposed to have anything to do with it, he's like, oh, slavery, Egypt, run. Like he's letting you know how to feel about this. And it's like, I don't know. And so we remember all these rules, right? And we get to the end of chapter 11 of Kings. Whoops, that's not it. Into chapter 11 of Kings. Actually, chapter 11, verse 6, it says, so Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not wholly follow the Lord as David his father had done. So what happened? What happened? See, this story of Solomon is so interesting. And I had to, like, when we were writing this sermon, Mark and I were like, there's so much. There's so much. Like 1 Kings 1 through 11 is just nothing about, it's about the blessings of Solomon, and then it's just like a train wreck right into the ground. Like it just goes straight down, and it's all because he was pining after Egypt and the things of Egypt. He was pining after the Babylon of the day. He was wanting the strength and the power and the security that came with all of that. He was chasing after those Egyptian horses. Do you think he meant to go away? I don't think he did. And that's what makes this story so interesting. Because there's so many stories out there that are just like this, where someone, they started off good, holy, and blessed with a good idea, and then totally went off the rails, right? I could say that. Like, that happened when I was riding my bicycle and I hurt my shoulder. Many of you don't know, this hurts me, all right? Which shouldn't hurt a 35-year-old. But that hurts me to raise my arm up because I was riding my mountain bike, which I didn't ride much. And I used to ride my mountain bike a lot, but I kind of switched to roads. And I was riding off-road, and this place where I was riding was like a downhill course. And there was a part of it where you could go and do a jump, or you could just go around the jump, like a wimp. And so this I was 32 at the time. This 32-year-old goes, "I'm not a wimp. I'm going to do the jump." And I landed on my head and shoulder and broke it and like all that stuff, right? I was chasing after some Egyptian horses there, right? I was a little more confident than I should have been. Another example of it, it's not as funny, but there's a radio show called This American Life. It's on NPR. It's a podcast too. And about a year ago, they had a story about a guy who grew up in suburbia Minneapolis, and his heritage was Somalian, and he heard about the Somali pirates, and he's like, I want to do something about those Somali pirates. I want to try to stop it. So he moved to Somalia to try to bring about some prosperity there, so that they wouldn't have to go and be a pirate anymore. Well, This American Life caught up with him in a Dutch prison, sitting in there for piracy for 20 years. And the long story short is that, he started getting in with all these guys, and suddenly there was a difficult situation, and he was trying to get money to get someone else out of a tough situation, and he was caught for piracy. Started off good, right? But he chased after those Egyptian horses. There was a movie that came out not too long ago called Machine Gun Preacher. Have you guys seen that? I was hoping it was on Netflix. It's about 10 years old now. And when I watched it, I was like, whatever. I don't really care about this, but I watched it anyway. This movie ended up kind of arresting me because it made me look into my own soul, which that's the best movies make you do that, right? So The Machine Gun Preacher is about this guy who's kind of a rough and tumble biker. And it's based on a true story, by the way. So this guy's a rough and tumble biker, kind of ends up with this church group and kind of gets coerced into going to Africa and building homes for people over there because he was a builder and kind of rough and tumble, And two things happened while he was in Africa. One, the Lord came to him. He kind of saw the Lord and had this big conversion experience. And the other one was he saw how the LRA was coming and kidnapping children and arming these orphans and making them into child soldiers, and he couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand seeing these children being made into these soldiers, so he said, I'm going to create an orphanage in this country. I'm going to create an orphanage, and that's what he does. He ends up creating this orphanage for these kids so they won't have to be armed in the military. Well, the LRA hears about it, isn't too happy about it, and starts kind of attacking it a little bit. So in order to save his orphanage, what does he do? He arms his kids. He ends up becoming the devil that he's trying to avoid. And at the end of that movie, I was like, oh, it's not the best movie in the world, but I was like, oh. He was chasing after those Egyptian horses, right? How have you chased after those Egyptian horses? How has it happened? What started off as blessed and good, and maybe you got a little bit of success and all that stuff, and all of a sudden you just kept following it into, and you ended up getting into something too deep, right? Like, I have a couple examples. I think we do this a lot of times in relationships, where we love the relationship so much and we're worried about it that we hold on to it so tight and we won't let go of it until we suffocate the life out of the relationship, right? Like that's I think that it turns a good thing into where you're chasing after those Egyptian horses, right? Like that's I see it also with working. Many of you know I was in Bentonville, Arkansas before that, but this is a problem just everywhere. Bentonville's Walmart's hometown, and people worked way too much there. They worked way too hard, and they worked unbelievable hours, and they always said that they did it for their kids, and they could rest when they were retired. Here's the problem with that. That when you retire after working like that, you don't know how to rest. And as I talk to retirees now, you find that you have no identity outside your work and you don't know what to do with yourself. Were you chasing after Egyptian horses your whole life and you don't know how to live now? Do I even have to talk about politics? Where you're, as long as your party gets elected, you're willing to deal with any kind of malfeasance just so that you can get your pet project or your thing? This isn't a Democrat-Republican thing either. Like this is both sides that do this. That we are complicit in attitudes of evil because maybe we'll get something that we want. Chasing after Egyptian horses, right? See, King Solomon, he was so much, and here's the point. King Solomon was so blessed. He was so much more blessed than any of us. God said to him, I will give you whatever you want. And he said the perfect answer, I want wisdom. And God gave him wisdom and power and riches and all those things. And what did he do with it? He followed after Egyptian horses. He became the very thing that he didn't want to do. He was blessed so much more than us, and yet he still fell. And I think this is the wisdom that we can glean from it. It's true that we all fall the same thing. That we all have Egyptian horses that we have all fallen for in our own lives. We all have things where we have decided this is right and this is wrong in our own eyes. That we have all those things, and the key to this is being honest about it. Is being honest about it. Realizing that we have sinned. That we have gone over, even if we weren't as great and blessed as Solomon, that we have still followed these other Egyptian horses into places that we weren't so happy, and that we have become sin itself. That we've become the very thing that we struggled with. And here's the whole idea. This is the nugget of this whole sermon series. You ready for it? God, in Amos, God basically says through the prophet Amos, you wanted to be Egypt and Babylon so bad. You wanted to be them so bad, I finally let you just become them. That's the nugget of wisdom behind this whole sermon series. You wanted to chase after the slavery, you wanted to chase after the riches and the power, and you wanted to chase after all these other gods. You wanted to be this powerful thing, and I gave you over to it. And that's the warning for us. Paul talks about this in Romans. And that's why confession is so powerful, because it makes us sit and go, that's me. I have become the sin that I have hated. I've become the sin that I've hated. But Paul also says that he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Listen, church. This is not a you problem. This is just us together. But we gather together as a church and we confess our sins and we go, I have issues, but God still comes into our issues. He comes, and when we deserve to be destroyed, when we deserve to be taken over by the sin that we hate, God intervened and came and blocked it off from us so that we would not be judged by the death that we so deserve, but we would be judged by the life that Jesus is giving us. That the day of the Lord would not fall on us, but would fall on Jesus instead, so that we might have his life and his goodness. This sermon's a harder topic than the last ones that have been. But hear this. That even if you've chased after Egyptian horses your whole life, that you've made a life out of defining what is right and wrong in your own eyes, know that Jesus still came and he died for each one of you. That you might become the very righteousness of God. You are forgiven. You have his life in you. So don't chase those Egyptian horses. Try to be wise when it comes to that. But I know you're going to do it because I do it. Right? And the best of us do it. Solomon was the best of us. And he still did it. But Christ was the one that came in and was truly the best of us. And his life has become our life. And that's good news. Let's say a prayer. Jesus, we thank you that you love us.